Excellent. Thanks everyone for joining us. Believe it or not, this is episode number 13. We started this at the start of COVID, thinking we were going to do a few episodes, and here we are 13 later, and we're booked well into January next year, which is amazing. So I think most of you know who we are, but for those of you who don't, professional partners work together with accountants to provide them with a platform to give their clients a chance to look at different opportunities they wouldn't ordinarily get to look at. So we've continued to work hard to roll these events out, along with, as we've just kept adding to it, and we've now got Chewing the Accounting Fat, we've got our podcast series, and lots of new things that are coming up. So keep an eye out on social media for everything that we've got coming out, with some really special guests coming up. So following from that, I'll hand it over to Nick and PJ to talk all things people.
Thank you very much, although we're not talking all things people today.
Next week, next Friday.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So
that's Jason.
Good to see you're on the same page.
That's a plug for next week. Make sure everyone turns up next week.
Isn't it wonderful when we can record this? And Taryn missed it as well, so that's I'll keep that for her.
Oh dear.
But yes, welcome back to everybody. Welcome. If you're here for the first time, I don't think. Oh, there's a couple, maybe Jason for the first time. But otherwise, for those of you that are returning, thanks for coming back. Look, it's always great when we can continue to have some really good topics to talk about. I'm not quite sure if everyone can maybe mute their lines as well. I had some feedback coming through. Look, there's probably two things. Our goal is to stop by about 12:45. Special shout out to the people that are outside Victoria with daylight saving that I usually forget about. So certainly Nick reminded me that he double checked this morning to say to make sure that it is the right time zone, which it was on Melbourne's Eastern Daylight Saving. Yes, so today our topic is going to be talking about going from the Gold Coast to global. And I suppose we chose this in particular because whether people know about TOA or not, it's probably not about TOA. It was more about what Nick Sinclair has been able to create and the mindset. And we did a podcast chat a few weeks ago, and it probably just opened my thought process to, it's not about whether you want to glow global, it's about having the systems and processes to glowing global. And nowadays, there's so many accounting firms that are operating outside their postcode bubble, outside their state even, where you've got firms that are dealing with clients all around Australia, even the opportunities that are even overseas with our expats over there. So I thought, great opportunity to get Nick on here. And again, he's a Gold Coast lad of account. Actually, I'm not going to steal his thunder. He'll probably talk. Make sure you're not muted. I don't know if Danny's muted you there, mate. But what we might do is, she's saying, no, not me. What we might do is kick off with, let's start with you, Nick. Maybe share a little bit about the TOA journey and probably where you started to where you are today, and then we can work backwards a little bit. Welcome, mate.
Thanks, mate. Excited to be here. I know there's a few people that have been, I know Jason's been around pretty much in the Panalytics point of view anyway, right from the start and seen it. But for me, I was running a financial planning and accounting business in Brisbane and on the Gold Coast. And one of the biggest challenges we had was we were growing fast and we lacked capacity. And that was our ongoing challenge that we had. And it just happened to be that I was in the Philippines for a global board conference with a group called Entrepreneurs Organisation. I'm not sure if has anyone heard of EO before? So Entrepreneurs Organisation. So if you have, that was probably the one pivotal thing that's changed a lot in my life, in personally, professionally. So for anyone that doesn't know EO, it's an organisation. You could say it's a networking organisation, but you don't go there to get leads. You go there to learn. And you meet with a group of business owners every month in what they call a forum. So I had my forum. None of them are in the industry. You can't be competing businesses. And you share topics on personal, business, or family. And every month there's a structure, there's a format. And I learned a lot through EO. One of the best things I learned was I used to go to a lot of networking events like BNI and other things. And I would go there and I would have other people telling me how to run a business, and they just started their business and they have no idea what they're doing, but yet they're happy to give the advice. To EO is you can only talk from an experience. So if someone's brought up a challenge that they're having at work and you've never had that challenge before, you can't talk. You need to say, look, based on I've never had that experience, I can't share anything. And then it goes around. So I learned a lot, but I also sat on the board. I was fortunate enough to be on a board. A gentleman who most of you will know, Rob Nixon, actually recruited me into EO. So he was the membership chair when I was going. And after a couple of months, they had someone fall off the board, or they had to remove them from the board. They just weren't doing what they were doing. He asked me to be on the board, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to learn from a lot of other leaders in the Queensland space anyway. So I went across to the Philippines, and one of our members there, a guy called Mike O'Hagan, owned a company called Mini Movers, said, look, I've got a back office over here. We're generating, a couple of thousand leads a day. I'm happy for you to come and have a look at what we're doing. And we got there early, so Rob dragged me along, and I said, yep, I'd love to come along and see it. And as soon as I walked in his office and saw that anyone that listed their house for sale or for rent, the next day, they would either get a personalised mail delivered to them, or they'd get a phone call if they'd been a prior client. It opened my eyes to go, hang on, we really lack capacity. We're a growth business, so we're looking for leads. How do we generate more leads? And it really opened my eyes up. And I was over there for 5 days. I was extremely ill. I was on a drip for two of the last 2 days. I went to the conference, the final gala dinner. The salad had been sitting there for 8 hours. I found out there was 25 of us out of 800 people that ended up getting sick, including Rob Nixon. Both of us were on drips in our hotel rooms. So my first experience being there wasn't extremely positive at the back end, but when I came back, it just opened my eyes up. And fast forward, I then said to my general manager at the time, look, we're going to move some roles into the Philippines. And she said, there's no way we're doing that, Nick. We're keeping everything on the Gold Coast in our Brisbane offices, the 2 offices, that's it. I said, all right, will you come on a holiday with me? And she said, what do you mean? I said, oh, it's a study tour. She said, yeah, okay, no worries. So I booked the trip. I didn't tell her we're going to the Philippines. I took her back to the Philippines. We went around 20 different providers, and at the end of it, she looked at me and said, Nick, we're flipping the business. I said, what do you mean we're flipping the business? She said, we're putting all of the roles in the Philippines, and we're having all of our local team doing the work that they should be doing. So we ended up putting on 30 staff. We had 38 in Australia, in Brisbane and Gold Coast. We put on 30 staff, and I had some of my team living there on a rotating basis for 6 months. And that was what it was meant to be. It was meant to be our own back office. Right. Rob Nixon, then I was on the board with him. He looked at what I was doing. He was obviously selling advisory at the time. So back in the, it was pre-Panalytics, it was Coaching Club. Okay. So he was basically coaching the move to advisory. And he saw me as a young punk almost. He said, why don't you come and speak on stage at some of the events? Just come to a couple of them if you want. I'll use you as basically this young guy is going to come and cut your grass and take your tax returns. And I was doing bookkeeping for $20 an hour. He wanted to use me as a tool, you could say, or a mechanism to show why people needed to move to advisory. But after the first event in Newcastle, I had 5 firms come to me saying, love what you do. We don't want to replicate it. Can we just put people in your office? I say being entrepreneurial, others call it young and dumb. I said, yep, we've got 20 spare desks. I worked out that those desks, if I sold the space on those desks, I'd have the whole office paid for and the support staff. So then I'd only be paying for my own cost of my staff. So I thought, yep, that was great. The problem is that after the roadshow of 3 weeks, I'd sold 90 seats. So it became a business. And then we doubled to 200, 400, 800. We're now 1,600. Next year will be 2,700 is the forecast. And it just keeps growing. So it turned into what I call a real business, as opposed to being for our own purpose and then being able to just sublease some space to cover our costs.
Wow. Well, there's something that, it's always great when you can try and put things together. It's a funny thing. You sort of mentioned Rob, obviously, and I'd be surprised if people don't know Rob, anyone on this call. And I had a great podcast chat to him only a couple of weeks ago from his new property and his little private golf course.
Yeah, up in Brisbane. Yeah.
Up in Brisbane. Yeah, exactly. And you also mentioned the Mini Movers guys. So again, I've got a connection through my father-in-law actually. So it's a funny thing how it's all sort of worked out. But your thought process there, and you mentioned EO as a really good that allowed you to expand. Sorry, as I let a few more people in. Nick, have you always had the big vision, or is that something that just over time grew and grew? What was your vision? If we, people often talk about the importance of your vision and your mission and your values, and there's no doubt all of that has a place in the way we grow our business. But is that something you always had a big vision for?
If I'm honest, no. I mean, I have a real passion for helping people. My parents went bankrupt, so they got really bad advice. Now, when they were going through bankruptcy, I was 17 at the time, so it was sort of, I ran away from it. I had a girlfriend, I moved out of home, and but when I look back at it, I go, you know, part of it was they got really bad advice. Part of it was their ignorance of being small business owners and trying to do too much too soon. So I had a real passion to help people, which is why I got into financial planning. I didn't want people to have to go through what my parents went through. And that was really what the passion was. And when I got into, you know, when I started out, I didn't want to work for someone else. It's probably the easy way to say it. I was young and I just wanted to progress too quick. I never had a big vision of where we went. I thought, you know, values, I thought all of that stuff, to be honest, was corporate rubbish. Right. And it was probably only 3 years into running Toll, where we were probably 600-700 staff, that I realised what the importance of values in that. I've never worked in corporate. I've always worked in small business. This business happened by default. I was passionate about helping, you know, individuals with their financial planning needs. That was my thing. The other thing with, I suppose, growth was I get bored really easily, like really easily. So I was always wanting to grow to stimulate my own challenge. That was probably, you know, and I learned the downfall of some of that. You know, growth isn't always easy. It's not always the right thing as well. Sometimes you do need to pull back, and we've certainly learned that along the journey. But, you know, I originally was growing because of, you know, I was young, I was naive. I wanted to, you know, push the limits, and then we'd get to that and be like, you know, this is a bit boring now because it's sort of business as usual. What more can we do? And I did that with, the financial planning. So we bought mortgage broking in, and then I got bored with that, and I got jack of having to wait for the accountants to get the work to us. I didn't think it was that hard. I went and bought an accounting firm and went, holy crap, what have I done? Like, this is, I think, you know, that was probably my big aha, going, well, hang on, they do more than just, you know, punch out this, not that easy. But I was, you know, we did that because we were sick of having to wait for the work, and our finance applications were getting delayed. And so we just went and bought an accounting firm, a small accounting firm, and then built it. And we just, that's always been my history. I'm always intrigued about how can you add more value and how can you deliver more? I mean, with the bookkeeping, when I had the accounting firm, we started the bookkeeping division because we saw it as a lead generation.
Yes.
So I did it as a $20 an hour bookkeeping. Like, that was probably the biggest mistake. We're still profitable doing it at $20 an hour, but it was a lead gen, because we knew 9 out of every 10 bookkeeping clients we would convert to an accounting client over time. You know, that was some of the stuff, but because we were doing it so cheap, we were, you know, we're growing too quick, and we weren't growing necessarily with the right clients either. So there was a lot of what I call young and dumb moves in it, but I think there's a lot of learnings that were positive out of it. So I think the short vision, well, there was no real vision. There is now. We've got a very clear roadmap of where we're going. But back in the early days, it was just, there wasn't a structure behind it.
Yeah, and look, I suppose that's the great thing about right place, right time, that, you know, people often talk about, and the opportunity that presents itself from those firms, that where you went to Rob's conference to speak about one thing and you got dragged into something else. So how is that now transformed into, obviously now, you know, we've got Brian on the call as well, and, you know, there could be other team members as well, but there's let's say the vision now, and to assist everyone that's here, and I'm going to open it up to questions soon as well. If you want to use the chat bar, please use the chat bar. I want to put your hand up. How important has that been to the next stage of the growth, to where you are today and probably where you want to be in 2022? You know, just making sure that you're really clear on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's critical. I mean, we do our strategic planning. It's over a week globally. We've actually got that next week. So we have a very structured approach. We do it every year, no matter what's going on in the world. We always make time to do that. We have a very clear strategy and operational meetings, weekly, daily, monthly, but particularly the quarterly and yearly is so important. And I think if you're not looking at the business the right way, then you're not going to be driving and improving the business. But I think the most important part is really around understanding where you add value in the business, and that was something that back when I had my accounting and planning, I knew what I was good at doing, which was sitting in front of clients. That was what I was good at doing. I was not good at the operational part. I was not good at, administration. I wasn't good at a lot of things. So I really identified early in my journey of having a business, where do I add the most value, and where do I need to employ people that are better than me at other areas? And, that's rung true with this business. We've had a CEO in running the business for the last 2.5 years. I do what I'm good at doing, which is this type of stuff, podcasts, Facebook Lives, like the market facing and client service side of it. I love, like, one of the projects I'm working on now is really looking at the client experience and journey and what makes firms that work with us really successful versus the ones that just do it and it's okay, and understanding all of the intricacies on that. And, bringing in Brian, for example, to run Australia was a bit over 12 months ago. The business was at a point where it needed regional leadership. We had a global leadership, but, the importance of maintaining service and having someone own and run a region when you're running in essence 4 regions is so critical. We found that when I had my accounting practice and planning practice in Brisbane and Gold Coast, we need a leader in each office. So this is just on a different scale that we've needed the independent leadership to really own and drive that function. And across the business, we have quite a large leadership team of functions and regions.
Okay.
But it's so important to do that. Is everyone doesn't own it, one
Yes.
person does.
Yes. And I suppose, like anything, it's so important for everyone to understand their role. I suppose we can always bring it back to, we've got Saints and we've got Tigers on here, and we've got other, we won't talk about the Blues until next year, but
What about the Lions, mate? They're actually going all right this year.
sorry, the Lions. I still remember running a conference one year and talking about the Lions. Actually, we'll bring this back, and I can remember having Justin, I'm trying to think, one of the guys we had, Marcus Ashcroft. So Marcus Ashcroft spoke at one of our conferences, and, he was a part of that elite Lions group that, played in the three-peats.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he spoke so specifically about everyone understanding their role and everyone playing their role.
Yep.
And you're right. That's so important to getting the team result at the end of the day. Yeah, we've all got to understand and respect and play each other's role to get that actual result. Mate, you spoke about your strategic planning day over a week, which is quite amazing. Now, again, I'll open this to, there's probably 24 on the line. If anyone wants to talk about this in particular, to how the firms go about doing this as well. Now, I've always been a big planner, and for those, there's a few of you on here that I've coached as well over my period of time, so you'll know how important the planning aspect is from an annual point of view, breaking that down to half year and then into quarterly. And then it breaks it down into those chunks of monthly, weekly, daily. That's how I've always looked at it. So what would you be doing in your strat plan? I know you spoke about, the operational side as well as the strategic side, just to help everyone. And then we're going to break down some of the systems and processes that are so important in that. What would you be looking at?
Yeah, well, it's evolved to 5 days. I mean, it never used to be, but the first 2 days are the executive. So the global executive team will meet for 2 days and basically decide on the big buckets. What are the themes globally of areas that we want to improve? So we'll come up with some very clear themes, like engage might be the theme, and that could be about engaging your clients and your team members more. And what does that mean for the Australian region? Well, they would then have a set of projects that fall outside of that. So the first 2 days in this sense are basically the global strategy, and we're talking about what are the big buckets of areas that we need to focus. So this year, for example, we focused on 3 key areas. Technology was one of them. The second was around the client experience. And when we talk about client, we talk about team members and our clients who they serve. Yep. And then the third one was really around internal process and systems, which is the deliverable. So when we're looking at the key 3 areas, they're the global initiatives. And then we had regional initiatives. So next week, the first 2 days is global. And then the next 3 days is really around regional initiatives. So taking those global and then looking at, for example, what do we need to do in Australia? So, where are we doing well? Where are there opportunities to improve? Where are there opportunities to expand and grow? And really mapping out that strategy. And then Brian will then take that back to his team and then they will then, I suppose, map the individual projects against that. So things like, do we expand to New Zealand? Do we expand to, you know, other areas within the business? At the moment, we provide full-time dedicated employees. Do we move to other areas? We really explore all of those and set a very clear method, I suppose, of what the next 12 months looks like. The philosophy that we follow is scaling up. So it is Vern Harnish's scaling up philosophy, the one-page plan. I mean, I've got the global one-page plan, and then every region has its own plan, and then every function has its own plan. But we've also brought in the Procter & Gamble play to win. They've got a philosophy around how Procter & Gamble globally, they run, I don't know, it's hundreds of different companies that are all billion-dollar companies, and they have a very structured, strategic way of doing planning. So we've moved from the scaling up and morph that into also this Procter & Gamble way, because I think we're at a size now with multiple countries that we operate in that the scaling up works to a point, but it just needs a little bit of finessing. But I think that I've been like you, if you don't plan, then you're planning to fail. I think that's and I put up a survey a couple of months ago on social and around how many accountants and bookkeepers had actually done their strategic planning. Now I know we're in tough times at the moment. I don't think accountants and bookkeepers have ever been busier. But if you don't set aside time to work out where you want to be, you're going to get there, and you may get to the wrong place. So I think it's, you know, taking out a day of your time, even if it had to be on a Saturday, to plan what's the next 12 months look like. You know, at the moment, I've got no capacity, I've got no time, I've got none of this. Well, how am I going to change that?
Yes.
Because nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yes.
But I think that that's really one area that the industry probably doesn't do enough of, to be honest. I don't think there's enough education and talk about it. I could be wrong, but that's just my view on it.
I might just quickly open up. Has anyone got any comments to that? Well, there's obviously a number of firms on here. Does anyone like to comment on in terms of the planning aspect and whether or not? I see Jason, Sam have just unmuted.
I know Sam's already done his. I know that they've spent the time to do it.
I'm actually spending a bit of time now with CPA. CPA's brought out a new initiative over the last probably 6 months. We got thwarted because COVID. It was meant to be a live session called My Firm, My Future, which again, and I've been an EO for 5-6 years now, so I'm familiar with the scaling up model that Nick uses. And it's sort of similar to that, and it comes back to basics, and it's encouraging accounting firms to actually go through this process. So CPA is finally on board in helping exactly what Nick's been talking about, which is a good initiative. So, and I'm assuming that, you know, Chartered and IPA and the rest of them are doing it as well. So, but yeah, so it is starting to get some traction, and it's starting to get more of a focus on small business, that it actually makes a difference. So I'm doing a lot of this work with my clients.
Right.
Because the clients are just lapping it up. They've been waiting for this stuff forever. So don't be afraid to have a look at it and ask your clients, because they'll look at the process to start with and similar to Nick and go, you know, this is high level corporate bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Then you start showing some results of people that have done it, and they go, well, hang on, that's what I want to do.
Correct.
So it's happening from industry, and I'm flowing that through. So it's actually, yeah, it seems to be getting a bit of a wave behind it, which is great.
Yeah, brilliant. So what's that CPA one again?
My Firm, My Future.
My Firm, My Future. Brilliant. Thanks for sharing. Sam, got anything to say, mate?
No.
We've done plans every year, probably for quite a number of years now. Gone away for 3 days. Well, normally go away for 3 days. This year we didn't. To do our planning, we always do it in June, and we do capacity planning where we want the practice to be, a whole range of marketing ideas and expansions. Because we similar to what Nick was talking before, we took on mortgage broking and general insurance because we were sick and tired of waiting around for other people. But so we've done that quite well. We've been using TOA now for about 18 months, and that's been working really well. And the one thing I would say probably in that respect, which is kind of what Nick was talking about, is if you don't have your own good systems in place within your practice, you are wasting your time trying to bring people from offshore. And the reality is that what I've learned very clearly is actually irrelevant whether they're offshore or onshore. The better your systems are, the better you will perform within your practice. And that goes even like we're now doing, we've done some, we haven't finished yet, doing a lot of Loom videos for processes. So if someone needs to learn how to do something that might be as simple as a BAS or a bank rec or something more complicated, it's all done on Loom. And that way the person, whether they be in the Philippines or in Melbourne, They just need to watch that video as many times as they need to get it right. And I think the one thing that taught us really well is to systemize and be consistent across the practice. That's made a very big difference for us.
That's brilliant. And I think, you know, again, from a systems point of view, yeah, you think about usually you think about a new team member starting and think about the induction process, and whoever it is, they need to learn all sorts of things depending on what level they come in. I know the capacity that's required to do that is quite a lot. So you're using the Loom videos, which is very, very clever, because once it's created, it can be replicated so easily. So it's about working smarter, you know, and that's the great thing about this. And probably the one thing that comes back to all of this, which, you know, sort of Jason, you mentioned, and Sam, you mentioned as well, and to everyone on the call, is what Nick's talking about as well. I think from what I can hear as well, you've been, personal development is important to you, because everything you've done with EO, or obviously the opportunity to speak at Rob's, and then the continued stuff that you're talking about with Vern Harnish. You know, Vern Harnish, if you haven't seen any of his stuff, go and check him out. Do a quick search as well. You know, he's got his, what he calls the big one-page plan. A lot of the stuff he gives away, it's all free. You get full access to it. He's got books. He's got all sorts of things. Every now and then he comes to Australia as well and does his presentations at Rod Laver. I suppose, how much has that helped you to create what you've created to today?
Look, I've always been curious. I mean, I read 1 to 2 books a month. So I read 1 to 2 books a month. I mean, at the moment, I've just finished the HubSpot inbound marketing courses. There's about 9 courses. I've been doing those as I drive to work and, you know, moving houses and stuff like that. I've been basically put on this. Basically, I'm now an inbound marketing certified person. But I get curious about something and I learn about it. And the reality is that I've always looked outside of the industry. I mean, I love our industry and I love there's some great people running some wonderful businesses. But I always look and go, oh, what other industry is someone running a really, really good business that you can take what they're doing and apply it to the accounting space? So I'm always curious, and I'm curious in many ways. And that's a big part of what I spend my time doing. I'm reading a book at the moment, Essentialism it's called, and it's about basically saying no and only doing the things you should be doing. And one of the theories that it talks about is, you know, Amazon and Apple and all of those, the leaders of those companies are always structured time every single day and every single week and every single month to have time where they just think. They have thinking time where they literally will just walk along the beach and they think. And they have, I mean, I think it's Jobs, is either Jobs or Amazon, where every year, twice a year, he'd go away for a week and he'd just read. He would go away into a retreat and he would have no one else there. He would be simply awake and he would read books and he'd think. He'd read books, blogs, and he would just basically map out what Amazon was going to do for the next, you know, 5-10 years. And when I go away on leave, when I was reading this book, I realized that every time I go away with the family, I read a lot. I read a lot more. And while they're swimming, I'll read at the pool. And I have all these ideas. When I come back, I'm very clear. And I realize that I need to do that now, not when I'm on the family holiday, but I need to actually just go and do that once a quarter, because this free time of thought, of just letting your thoughts run and not having to worry about responding to a client or doing the actual work, gives you all these ideas that makes your business a better business. And I don't think our diary's always stuffed with work we have to do, and we don't give ourselves that free time to be able to think about, you know, how can I serve my client better? You know, I've had 5 clients ring up and ask about this one thing. You know, how can I get it to them quicker and faster?
And they're the things that you would then work through with your executive team and your next layer of management as a part of your planning to say, well, how do we improve those systems? How do we, and that, look, I agree totally in terms of that is how you grow or have that mindset to growth as well. Is that fair to say?
It is. I mean, the one thing I'm probably known in the business for is that my diary is managed out for the next 18 months. So the next 18 months, my diary is mapped of when I'm having time off with my family, when I'm going away with just my wife, when I'm going away with just my kids. I put all of that in because I know I pushed the school to get their calendar 2 years in advance so that I could work on that. It took a couple of years to get them to, but I'm very structured with where my time is and then where we can add value. And my diary, I map out for the quarter and then I map it out. So for the next 3 months, it's already done. Like I'm fully mapped until January. And then in December, I'll map out the next quarter, and there is available times within it. But by providing structure, I have the ability to be able to think about things when I need to, as opposed to just always being busy. And it's surprising when you say no to things. Like, I hate disappointing, but the reality is that other people get it done.
Yes.
Like, if it needs to get done, then someone else will do it.
Yeah. Look, there was an interesting comment, Sam. I might throw to you for a second there. You just mentioned something about you give staff allow time to develop systems and process and give them that ownership. Mate, again, do you mind sharing a little bit about that? Because again, I'm all for that. I was actually talking to someone last week, I don't know who it was, about and Google have been doing it for a long time now, about giving them their time to be creative. Let the creators be creative, and how many types of systems or products or services that they've created just by giving people 5% of Google time to their Google employees. Do you mind talking to us about that one, Sam?
Yeah, so what we do is everyone's got a budgeted time they have to provide for input, for chargeable time, as well as what will then be their billing time. But we also give them project time in their budget, so they know that they have time allocated to be able to spend on that, because we all tend to get bogged down with our work and then it just goes on and on and on. So they actually have to do it. We report back every month on everyone's project time as well as their input time, and a few other things. And sometimes people put up their hands for certain things to do sometimes, and there are certain people who do certain things really well. Other times there are other things that we allocate to people, and it could be Loom videos, it could be improving our work papers, it could be learning about a particular new process, it could be setting up a new advisory division, it could be a whole range of things. But what's important is to give everyone the opportunity to try and do things to develop. I think without development, people stagnate and then they get lost and they want to leave and go somewhere else where they can develop. And I've found that one of the hardest things to try and do for staff is to keep them motivated, keep their development going. Because if they hit a brick wall or they hit a ceiling, they then get bored and they want to move on somewhere else.
I think that's also, my experience working with so many firms as well, is that also attracts team members to your business, because they are looking for that layer of stimulation. If you're looking to do something outside the norm, and whether you're an accounting firm or a normal business, and I suppose that new generation coming through, that's what they're looking for.
I think the other thing, Paul, can I add to that? I think the one great thing is that I've seen a lot of businesses that say they allocate it, but they don't actually allocate it, because then they go, all right, you still need to be 95% productive, but I've got you this time. I think that what it is, though, is that, we did this in a quarter. One of our quarterly themes was around process and systems. And we've got 240 support staff supporting the business. So we got a lot done. But if you look at your business, even if you got 5 team members and they did one process a week each, in a month, that's 20 a month. In 12 months, that's 240 processes you would fix or fine tune or improve. And always, when we're looking at it, don't look at it from an internal point of view. Look at it, what is the client experience? What is the process that your client goes through? And then how do you make that better internally, so you're more internal efficient, but then how do you deliver a better experience? And I haven't seen a business that doesn't have even if it's, yourself and you're a sole practitioner, you can still do one a week, you're going to get 52 processes done a year. So I think that's just allocating the time for that and then empowering your team to be able to do it.
It's a great idea. Sort of one of the things I can still remember what we used to do, we used to focus on this. When I was in the UK running the business over there, we used to, at the start, I created it. It was a think tank session. Every single week we had a 10-minute think tank session, and each team member had to come to us with what they thought was a client experience issue. And then we would just toss it around, have a whiteboard. After 3 weeks, I ended up stepping away and empowering the team to say, you guys can do this. You guys can actually do this yourself. Why don't you come up with some solutions? Most people are really good at coming up with problems and not solutions. So the idea was to train them, come up with the problem and the solution at the same time and bring that into play. And then let's work at how we can implement it. And like you said, when you start giving them the opportunity, and I think Sam said it as well, you give them the ownership, they feel like that they're empowered to make their only little decisions, but they're given that enablement, I suppose.
Well, it's the right people doing the right work at the right time at the right cost. And the easiest way to look at processes is map out the process you're doing and then look at what could be automated by technology. So then it could be they go and investigate what technology can be used. What part of that could be done by someone other than you? Your charge out rate or your value per hour is X. is that task within that process worthy of your time? And that sounds really arrogant, but it could be, well, no, that task could be done by someone at a lower charge out rate that would add more value and enjoys doing that work. I don't like doing admin, so I don't want to do it. So I think that's really where you can empower your team to look at what they're doing repetitively every day, because it's annoying them. Let's be honest. They're doing things that's repetitive all day, every day, because the process sucks. And no one's actually spent the time to go, instead of me doing it 100 times, I'm just going to fix it once and for all, because it's just too hard. It's just easier to keep repeating it.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Love it. I just want to, before I go to, there's probably two things. I might just open it up. Has anyone got a question that they'd like to ask Nick? I'll take silence as no, that's okay. Mate, so for those, and I know we've spoken about a few things, for those that are looking to this, and we have just started the second quarter of the financial year. And for us here in Victoria, we've had a very interesting start to the whole calendar year. What advice would you provide as a starting point? There's always a lot of, there's always a lot of noise. Like you said before, there's also a lot of work taking place. If you were going to provide a starting platform for our firm to say, right, yeah, look, I like a lot of things that I've heard, but where do I start? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we're 8 weeks away from Christmas, I think it is. So, I mean, this quarter's almost, I call this quarter half done. Like I had a project meeting this morning with my project team on our, what we call revolutionising a client journey. And I said, we got 6 weeks basically, and then we're done. So my thing would be is actually, the first thing is getting very clear on what you want out of the business. And I think that's the first thing, is understanding what you want out of it. And that's the most important. If you want a business that provides you with X amount of income or X amount of free time that you only work 4 days, or if it's, it could be more than that. It could be, well, I just want X. And then the secondary one is then plan for the business on how do you achieve that. And I think, business owners wear 10 hats. I mean, there's that 10 hats philosophy of all the hats that we wear as business owners. What are the things that you're good at doing and what are the things you aren't? But I think the first step is actually just sitting down and working out the plan for the next 6 months for the business, and from a high level around what does the business need to achieve, and then what do we actually need to do to be able to achieve that. Now, I think one of the things that a lot of firms struggle with is even just mapping out their workflow, like understanding like what is the work they're going to be doing for the next 6 months. I mean, that's probably what I would think one of the first things. I mean, we do a people strategy and a workflow strategy as part of our strategic or operational planning, which is part of the strategic planning, which is simply what people are we going to need to be able to deliver the growth results that we're setting. Because I know when I had my bookkeeping business, for example, we would set goals for revenue and clients, and we never set out how many people we needed to deliver it. And that was our biggest problem, is that we got all this work in and we couldn't deliver. So then the service dropped and, we lost clients because of it. So I think, a lot of people go, we're going to have this much revenue. Well, great. How many people do you need to deliver it? Because people aren't going to work, like someone was saying earlier, they get bored and they go off to another business. They're not going to come and work 60 hours a week for you. If there's no future and there's no plan and there's no learning and development for them, why would they? Like, I see some job ads that are run and I go, I wouldn't want to work at that company. It sounds horrible. Like, yes, come and slave your life away so I can get, my business to the point where I need it to be. I mean, this is the turning point. What's in it for me? And I think that's really a big part of, if you're not clear on the business and where it's going, I mean, your team members they need to be bought into it. And I'll shout out to Mike and Taryn and that at Seamless. Like, I love seeing what they do. It's very clear on where they're going. It's very clear on what they're wanting to do. You're seeing all their images and that, what are their 3-year goals? Like, I love that type of thing. And I think there's a lot of accounting firms that do that, but equally there's not a lot that don't. But you look at the best businesses that attract the best talent, there's a reason why, because you're inspired to want to work for them.
Yep.
So I think for me, it's building out that 1-page plan. I mean, Vern Arnish gives you the template. I mean, we have that structure. It's basically his structure. We've just modified it. It talks you through exactly what to do and how to do it. Yes. And it doesn't take that much time. I mean, the reality is if you're a big business with many partners, probably would, but smaller business, you could easily knock it over, and at least your team can buy into that vision then.
Yeah, look, mate, I agree. And that's the great thing about, I was shocked when I first came into contact with Vern maybe 15 years ago, and I was surprised how much content he provides you, the and the ability to, there's all notes to everything, so you understand. And as you're going through because people go, well, if I'm going to do a strategic planning day, where do I start? Well, you can use his plan that he provides you with, and there's notes to all of that. There's things that may not be applicable to you, don't do them. 80% of the old 80-20 rule tends to come into it. So 80% of it will be applicable to you. So if it's something that you haven't done and you want to consider and you want to do, please jump on and have a look at that. Some of the stuff is outstanding to what he actually has available to everybody. Mate,
can I just say this one thing though? If you look at Slipstream, you look at Rob Nixon, you look at Trent from Teach It Forward, they're all the coaches in this industry. They all use in some way Vern Harnish's philosophy.
Yes.
And I think that's the reality is the benefit is if you know and understand how to use it, like Jason was saying before, you can then on-sell that to your clients. I mean, and that's the great thing about that is that once you know how to do it, you can then on-sell it and talk from that experience and add value to your clients on that aspect as well. I mean, quarterly themes, we have these little 3D. So there's these these turned up on my desk today. So our theme is all around, what is it? The thinking in 3D. So that's our theme. So we have all these glasses turn up and there's all this stuff that goes on with it. So it's part of our quarterly themes. You make it fun as well.
Yes.
Where's Brian's?
Oh, he's wearing them. They're just his normal ones.
They suit you, Brian.
I love it. Hey guys, and again, it's a bit faded and a bit, but this is mastering the Rockefeller habits of Vern Harnish. So again, he teaches this around the world, and his message, yes, he is a Yank, so some people don't resonate as well with that, but his message is so on point. It's not funny. So again, in terms of a starting point and giving you a bit of structure, I'd always sort of go towards that. If you want to know more, hit me up and I can always point you in the right direction. Nick, just in closing, mate, again, all of us, we're human. We don't get everything right all the time. What's some of the mistakes you've made that you can share?
Many.
No, we don't,
Many. Where do I start? There's pages of them. I think one of the things the thing that I learned is fail and pivot. Try something and pivot pretty fast. I mean, for me, it was growing too fast. I mean, when I had my accounting and planning business, my attitude was, I'm young, I can, what's the worst that can happen? It goes all pear-shaped and I'll start again. Like that was my attitude when I first started. So growth for growth's sake is the biggest thing that I learned. And particularly when I had my planning business, we were growing really fast and at times it wasn't needed. And that has an effect on your personal life. It has an effect on, your friendships. It has an effect on many things because you neglect things. And the biggest thing I learned out of that was you've only got 4 burners. You've got obviously your business, you've got your family, you've got your relationship with your partner, and then you've got your friends in that. And you can't have all 4 burners burning at top gas all the time. Something always needs to give. And for me, I went through a divorce. I was, my kids I spent a lot of time with, and I spent a lot of time on business, but I didn't spend a lot of time with my ex-wife. And that was one of the, the things that I learned through that period. And, all good comes out of bad, but I think for me, it was just around having a very clear, if you're going to grow, what's the purpose of it? What's the reason for it? Not just do it because you get bored easy or because you love the challenge, because not everyone's on that same journey. And team members, we've had some team members that couldn't keep up with the growth. They didn't like change. And when you employ people and they're not ready for change and regular change, then it can be a struggle. So that was probably my biggest learning in summary.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I think we can all, it's probably whether it's the grey hair or not, as you get older, they're the sort of things that you do learn. And the old scenario of make the mistake a learning experience. So yeah, well done. Good work. Love it. Well, mate, I'm not quite sure if anyone has a...
Yeah, I've got a question.
Oh, go Saints.
Yes, absolutely.
Can't be a footy one.
No. Nick, in the current circumstances, is there any issues with finding employees over in the Philippines?
No, I think the biggest, last month we got 2,500 applications.
Oh, okay.
So, we average about 25 to 30,000 applications. I think the challenge is at the moment is that obviously the environment over there is, it's probably similar to Melbourne, to be honest, where they are working from home. So they're not working in our office environment.
Bet you it's not cold.
It's not cold though. It's pretty hot. But I'd rather be cold than be stinking hot too without aircon in some cases. So talent's not a shortfall. It's just they're working from home, and some of them are not necessarily wanting to return to the offices anytime soon because of the way that I suppose COVID is going. But talent-wise, there's not a lack of talent there at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Any other questions before we look to wrap up? No.
I would like to know more about the Procter & Gamble philosophy of playing to win.
Yeah, well, if you look up I probably won't give it the justice, but there's a book called Playing to Win, and it's the Procter & Gamble philosophy, and it's really around, and I get quite defensive. Like if it's not my idea, in executive planning, I'm known to squash things pretty quick. If I don't like the sound of it, like, oh, let's build this offering, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's not something that I like. And it takes the question that I learn out of this is what has to be true for it to work. So instead of saying no, saying what has to be true for me to be comfortable to make that decision. And I think that, work from home would be a prime one. In the past, a lot of people have said, no, I'm not doing it. Everyone has to be in the office. Well, what has to be true for us to be able to have an offering where our employees can work from home? And I mean, there's a whole structure around it. That's not giving it justice, but for them, it was around where do you want to play to win? So what's the geographies, where the regions, what are the services? And it's all about, if you're going to go into a market, you go in to win. You don't go in there to play second. You go in there to win. So yeah, playing to win, I probably didn't give it the justice, but I've thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. It's about 240 pages. It was a good read.
Nick, can I just ask you, if you've got the staff in the Philippines working from home because of COVID, how do you manage the security issues over data and so forth if they're working from home?
Much the same that we do with our team members in Australia that are remote, or Toronto, and that. It's the same philosophy, the same structure. I mean, we've got 30-something IT people professionals within our business. So we do manage it. I mean, we're big advocates of Practice Protect. They built that product in essence and for us 7 years ago. I was mates with Jamie. I said, look, there needs to be something, and then that product was built. So I think that was the first thing. I mean, they're all our computers, so they've got all of our security protocols. We can monitor and oversee probably 95% of what we could. They're just not on our infrastructure at the moment. That's the only difference.
Can I add to that, Nick?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So your Practice Protect is a must for anyone. It doesn't matter whether you have people overseas or not. I think if you don't have that, seriously, you really need to have a hard look at your practice. But I think the only issue there is, which is not TOA's fault, it's no one's fault, is that when they're working from home, the internet's never going to be quite as good as it is within the TOA offices. But we've had, in the last, say, 6 months, we had a little bit of downtime, but really fairly minor considering all of the other issues that have potentially been going on around the world. So I have no issue, and no issue with data issues or loss of protection of your data. It's the same, as Nick says, the same whether we're in Australia or whether we're over there.
I think the difference, though, is in fairness, is that we've probably got a lot better data protection mechanisms and strategies than any accounting business does. I mean, they can't print, we don't have USB drives, we don't have CD drives, we have our security overlays on the computers.
No mobile.
No mobiles. The structures that we have is, I mean, we've got a corporate IT division, so we run enterprise level security, and there's very few accounting firms that have enterprise level security. Even we can see what goes on the computer all the time. So when you look at all those mechanisms of, we can see everything that happens and we manage everything that happens, it is definitely a concern. But I mean, to be honest, the internet connections with the Philippines team that report to me versus the ones in Toronto has got the worst internet. Like out of all the countries I'm dealing with, San Diego in the US, Toronto has been the worst from a connectivity point of view, and some regional parts in Australia also.
So how do you stop them using their mobile phones at home? I can understand it if they're in your office in the Philippines.
You can't. I mean, the mobile phone you can't. But it's like my team members here in Australia. I can't stop them working on their mobile phone while they're at home as well. I think you've got the end of the day, it comes back to professionalism and knowing who you're employing, and the checks and all of that. And I think the reality is, if someone's not active on their computer, you can see that. And if they're not active, well, they're obviously not working. What are they doing?
That wasn't really the thrust of the question. I guess it's a question of, well, if they've got data on a screen and they've got a mobile phone, they can take a photo of it. So how do you protect against the security of that client data if they're working from home?
Well, you can't, but you can't do that with anyone here in Australia too. I mean, I've seen so many accounting firms where people have taken the whole database and set up and rung all of them. I mean, there's things you can't, but I mean, why would someone do that? Like, why would someone want to take a screenshot? Like, that's the part that I don't.
Can I just interrupt? It's interesting because it does come up a lot, and I always think, what are they actually going to do anyway, even with a screenshot? Like, this is what we've got to think about too, you know, like what would they actually do with it?
Well, why would they? I mean, we've been 7 years, we've never had, I mean, they're professionals, they're CPAs. Why would they? They're not the type of people that are going to run off into, you know, criminal activity. Yeah, I think that's I suppose my question always goes back to, I mean, it's like with anything, there is trust in everything you do, and there's certain things you can monitor and manage as much as you possibly can. But again, if we're looking at the small things like that, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't. The answer is for you can't. Like, I can't guarantee that everyone won't do anything. In our offices, I certainly can, but it's like my team members, when they're working from home in Toronto or San Diego, I don't know if they're working all day. I've just got to trust that I've employed the right people to do the right thing and they're ethically right. And we've got as much system and process in place to be able to trap things if they did occur. But, you know, yeah, there's no guarantee with anything with anyone, I think, globally.
Okay, thanks.
Well said, well said. Look, we'll look to wrap up. It's 12:55 Melbourne time. Confuses all of our Brisbane people. So
7:55, it's lunchtime now.
It's lunchtime, exactly. Thanks, Nick. Again, just a really easy chat. Great questions from everybody. We've put a fair bit of information in the chat bar as well, whether it be about the books that people have mentioned, whether about Vern scaling up, you know, mastering the Rockefeller habits, all those sorts of things. Check it out. If those are the sorts of things that can give you, again, another little bit of a step up to thinking about how to position the firm for growth, please do it. Obviously, we're always open to all sorts of different things. So if you want to reach out to us and ask us questions, please do so. I'm going to hand over to Danny just very quickly. We've got next week. I know Danny mentioned it at the start. She was beginning with the end in mind, I think. But we are actually next week. We've got our Chewing the Accounting Fat session with Jason Cunningham. So Cutters from the practice will be talking about, and you know, we're going to be going into people. So a lot of the stuff we've spoken about today, we're going to be going into a little bit more detail about all sorts of different things about retaining, attracting, recruiting, engaging, all sorts of things to do with people. So again, if you're free, next Friday, 12 p.m, please make sure you join us. I'll shoot across to Danny. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for the detail there, PJ, because I think I would have been too scared to try and tell everyone what we had on in the next couple of weeks, seeing as I introduced the wrong event today. So thanks again, everyone, for being here online, and it's great having your support, and your input is always so valuable. So yeah, look forward to seeing you. Keep an eye out on social media for all our upcoming events. We've got some really good speakers coming up, which is exciting. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Go Saints.
That was great.
Thank
you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Go Tigers.
Catch up with you shortly.
See you, JB. Yeah, good to see you, mate.
Thanks very much for the wonderful
Pleasure.
podcast.
Thanks, Freddie.
Yeah.